standing in my cap and gown on the stage of Northwestern University's medical school graduation ceremony, I should have felt nothing but pride. 4 years of relentless studying, countless sleepless nights, and the culmination of a dream I'd held since I was 12 years old. Instead, I felt the familiar sting of my father's words echoing across the auditorium. Finally, someone else can support you instead of us. Dr. Marcus Hamilton, my father, had said this loudly enough for half the faculty to hear, his voice carrying that particular tone of relief mixed with disdain that I'd grown accustomed to over the years. He was standing with my mother, Patricia, my older brother David, and my sister-in-law Jennifer in the family section, all of them nodding and chuckling as if he'd just delivered the world's greatest punchline. Honestly, Marcus, my mother said, adjusting her designer handbag, 26 years of this burden. Thank God for medical residencies and their salaries. David, ever the golden child with his MBA and corner office at Hamilton Industries, our family's manufacturing empire, shook his head with theatrical sympathy. I've been telling you both for years. Some people just never learn independence. At least now she'll be forced to sink or swim on her own. Jennifer, who'd married into the family 5 years ago and somehow appointed herself the authority on fiscal responsibility despite never working a day in her life, added her 2 cents. Maybe now she'll appreciate everything you've sacrificed for her education. The irony was so thick I could have performed surgery on it. For 26 years, they'd treated me like the family charity case. The ungrateful daughter who'd chosen medicine over joining the family business. The financial drain who'd selfishly pursued her dreams instead of contributing to Hamilton Industries' bottom line. The disappointment who'd somehow managed to graduate summa cum laude from Northwestern while maintaining the family's belief that I was a hopeless burden. What they didn't know, what none of them had ever bothered to ask or investigate, was that the trust fund they thought had been supporting me all these years wasn't actually my grandfather's money at all. It was mine. All of it. Every penny of the family money they'd been so graciously allowing me to access had come from the biotechnology patents I'd been filing since I was 19. 7 groundbreaking innovations in medical device technology, each one worth millions, all developed during my undergraduate years and licensed to major pharmaceutical companies under shell corporations that kept my name carefully hidden from any Hamilton family radar. The monthly payments they thought came from grandfather Hamilton's estate? Those were my patent royalties, filtered through a trust structure so complex that it would take a team of forensic accountants months to unravel. The allowance they'd been giving me? It was my own money, recycled back to me through a system I'd designed specifically to maintain their illusion of control. But more than that, so much more, was the fact that the very foundation of their comfortable lifestyle, their business success, their ability to maintain the Hamilton family prestige, had been quietly, invisibly supported by me for the past 7 years. Every time Hamilton Industries hit a rough quarter, mysterious investors appeared with exactly the capital needed to keep things smooth. Every time David's poor business decisions threatened major contracts, sudden windfalls of new clients materialized out of nowhere. Every time the family faced any kind of financial pressure, the universe seemed to conspire to solve their problems with elegant, timely solutions. The universe, of course, being me. Through a network of shell companies, investment funds, and carefully orchestrated business relationships, I'd been the invisible hand keeping the Hamilton family empire not just afloat but thriving. The manufacturing equipment David thought he'd negotiated such great deals on? I owned the leasing company. The major contracts that kept their factories humming? I was the silent partner in half their biggest clients. The real estate investments that had made Dad so proud of his business acumen? I'd been feeding him insider information through intermediaries for years. They thought they were supporting me. In reality, I'd been supporting them. And now, standing on this stage listening to my father's public declaration of relief at finally being free of his burden, I realized something had crystallized inside me. A decision that had been forming for months, maybe years, finally clicked into place with the precision of a surgical instrument. If they truly believed I was such a drain on their resources, then the ethical thing to do would be to remove that drain entirely. I smiled and pulled out my phone. The first call was to Meridian Trust Holdings, the entity that managed what my family believed was Grandfather Hamilton's trust fund. "Good afternoon, Dr. Hamilton," came the familiar voice of Margaret Chin, my private banker for the past 5 years. "Congratulations on your graduation. I assume you're calling about the trust fund arrangements." Actually, Margaret, I'd like to freeze all distributions immediately. Full stop on any further payments to the Hamilton family accounts. Understood. And the patent royalties? Should I redirect those to your primary investment account? Yes, and Margaret? Activate the withdrawal clauses on all the Hamilton Industries support structures. I want everything unwound within the next 48 hours. There was a brief pause. Dr. Hamilton, you understand this will affect approximately $63 million in various support mechanisms? The manufacturing contracts, the equipment leases, the property holdings. All of it. Very well. I'll initiate the process immediately. I ended the call and immediately dialed the second number. Davidson, Crowell and Associates, came the crisp voice of my attorney. Jonathan, it's Sarah. Execute the Hamilton Industries extraction. All shell company investments, all silent partnerships, all support structures. I want clean breaks across the board. Sarah, this is extensive. The ripple effects will be significant. Hamilton Industries will lose approximately 40% of their operational support within a week. That's the point. And your family will inevitably discover that all of this support was coming from you. Jonathan, they just publicly announced their relief at no longer having to support me. I'm simply honoring their wishes. He chuckled, a sound that held both admiration and slight concern. Understood. I'll coordinate with Margaret to ensure everything is processed cleanly. You should know, though, that this will likely trigger some interesting revelations for your family once they start trying to figure out what happened. Let me worry about that. The third call was to Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the Chief of Staff at Chicago General Hospital, where I'd be starting my residency in trauma surgery. Sarah, congratulations on graduation. Are you ready to save some lives? More than ready, Dr. Martinez. But I wanted to let you know that my financial situation has just simplified considerably. I'll be entirely self-sufficient from this point forward. That's wonderful to hear. Independence is a beautiful thing. It really is. By the time I'd finished my calls, the graduation ceremony was winding down. Families were gathering for photos, congratulations were flowing, and the general atmosphere was one of celebration and new beginnings. My family was still clustered in their same spot, probably planning where to go for the obligatory graduation dinner. Dad was checking his phone with that slightly irritated expression he got when Hamilton Industries required his attention during family events. Mom was reapplying lipstick in preparation for photos. David and Jennifer were discussing something that required a lot of hand gesturing and serious nodding. None of them had noticed my phone calls. None of them had any idea that in the span of 15 minutes, I'd just completely restructured their entire financial reality. I walked over to join them, my graduation cap slightly askew and my diploma tucked under my arm. There she is. Mom exclaimed, immediately arranging us for photos. Our little doctor. Now we made reservations at Chez Laurent for dinner. I know it's expensive, but consider it our graduation gift to you. One last meal on the family before you start supporting yourself. How thoughtful, I said, smiling genuinely for the first time all day. Dad clapped me on the shoulder with the kind of awkward affection he'd mastered over the years. Physical contact that managed to convey both pride and distance simultaneously. We're proud of you, Sarah. Even if we don't always understand your choices. Medicine is a fine career, even if it's not particularly lucrative. Oh, I think I'll do just fine financially, I replied. David laughed. Well, you'll certainly have to. No more Hamilton family safety net. Time to see how the other half lives. Speaking of which, Jennifer added, you should probably start looking into those income-based loan repayment programs. Medical school debt can be crushing if you're not careful. The irony was becoming almost painful. Here they were, offering financial advice to someone who could have bought their entire company with pocket change, while simultaneously celebrating their freedom from supporting someone who'd been subsidizing their lifestyle for nearly a decade. But I smiled and nodded because in about 48 hours the education would begin. We went to dinner at Chez Laurent, where my family spent the entire meal discussing Hamilton Industries' recent successes, David's brilliant business strategies, and Dad's exceptional leadership during challenging market conditions. They talked about their upcoming vacation to the Hamptons, Mom's plans to redecorate the dining room, and Jennifer's new jewelry collection. All funded, unbeknownst to them, by my innovations in medical technology. I ate my filet mignon and listened to them plan a future that was about to look very different from their expectations. The waiter brought the check and Dad made a great show of picking it up. Our treat, remember? Consider it an investment in your independence. Thank you, I said. I'll remember this dinner for a very long time. 2 days later, I was settling into my new apartment near Chicago General, a modest one-bedroom that I'd deliberately chosen to maintain appearances, when my phone started ringing. The first call was from Dad. Sir, we need to talk. Something very strange is happening with the business. Oh, what kind of strange? We've lost 3 major contracts in the past 24 hours. And our equipment leasing company is demanding immediate payment of some kind of penalty clause I've never heard of. Do you know anything about corporate law? This doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, Dad, but I'm just starting my medical residency. Corporate law isn't really my area. Right, of course. It's just, the timing is odd. The second call came from David. Sarah, this is going to sound bizarre, but did you ever hear Grandfather mention anything about complex investment structures in his will? Not really. Why? Because our financial advisor is saying some very strange things about the trust fund. Apparently, there are irregularities in the documentation. He's asking questions I can't answer. That does sound complicated. The thing is, all of this started right after your graduation. The same day you graduated, actually. It's probably just a coincidence, but... David, I'm sure whatever it is will get sorted out. The third call was from Mom. Sarah, honey, I hate to bother you during your first week of residency, but we're having some temporary cash flow issues. Just a few bills that came due at an awkward time. I don't suppose you could help us out? Just a small loan until we get this business situation resolved. Mom, I'm a first-year resident. My salary barely covers my own expenses. Of course. I just thought, well, you've always been so resourceful. The calls continued for a week. Dad, increasingly frustrated with equipment breakdowns and supplier issues. David, growing paranoid about the sudden string of coincidences affecting their business relationships. Mom, delicately hinting at financial pressures she'd never had to consider before. And then Jonathan called. Sarah, your family has hired forensic accountants. How do you know? Because the accountants called me. Apparently, they've traced some of the dissolved financial structures back to Davidson, Crowell and Associates. They're asking very pointed questions about shell companies and anonymous investment vehicles. What did you tell them? That client confidentiality prevents me from discussing anything without proper legal authorization. But Sarah, they're getting close. Within a few weeks, they're going to piece together enough to realize that their mysterious benefactor has been you all along. Good. Jonathan, they wanted independence. They're about to get exactly what they asked for. The revelation came 3 weeks later, at what was supposed to be a strategy meeting at Hamilton Industries. I know this because David called me afterward, his voice shaking with something between rage and disbelief. Sarah, I need you to come to the office. Right now. I'm in the middle of a 12-hour shift, David. People's lives are literally in my hands. This is about our lives. Our family. Everything we've worked for. Please. Something in his voice made me realize the moment had finally arrived. The educational component of this experience was about to begin. I arranged for another resident to cover my patients and drove to Hamilton Industries. The conference room was a tableau of devastation. Dad sat at the head of the table, his usually perfect posture slumped with defeat. Mom was crying quietly into a tissue. Jennifer looked like she'd seen a ghost. David was pacing behind a pile of financial documents that covered most of the table's surface. And in the corner, looking deeply uncomfortable, was a man in an expensive suit who could only be the forensic accountant. Sarah, Dad said when I entered, his voice barely above a whisper. Please tell me this is some kind of mistake. He slid a document across the table toward me. It was a comprehensive financial analysis, with my name highlighted in yellow in approximately 400 different places. Tell me you haven't been, that you weren't. He couldn't finish the sentence. I picked up the document and scanned it quickly. The accountants had done excellent work. They'd traced every shell company, every investment vehicle, every carefully constructed financial structure back to its source. The entire 7-year history of my invisible support was laid out in meticulous detail. This is very thorough, I said. Sarah. Mom's voice was pleading. Please tell us this is wrong. I looked around the room at their faces. Dad, who'd publicly celebrated his relief at no longer having to support me. David, who'd lectured me about independence and financial responsibility. Jennifer, who'd condescended to me about loan repayment programs. Mom, who'd treated my graduation dinner like charity. All of them staring at me with the dawning realization that everything they'd believed about their lives was fundamentally incorrect. It's not wrong, I said quietly. The silence that followed was profound. But, how? David's voice cracked. How is this possible? You're a medical student. We were supporting you. Actually, you weren't. You haven't supported me financially since I was 19. The trust fund is my money. Patent royalties from medical device innovations I developed during undergrad. Every penny you thought came from grandfather's estate actually came from my biotechnology research. Dad's face had gone completely white. That's impossible. Portable blood analysis devices for emergency medicine. Automated surgical suturing systems. Minimally invasive cardiac monitoring technology. 7 patents, Dad. Licensed to companies like Medtronic and Boston Scientific. The first one alone generates about $4 million a year in royalties. $4 million? Mom whispered. The trust fund was just my money being managed by my financial team and redistributed back to me in a way that maintained your illusion of control. But that's not the interesting part. I picked up another section of the forensic report. The interesting part is this. Every time Hamilton Industries faced financial difficulties, mysterious solutions appeared. New contracts, favorable equipment deals, beneficial real estate opportunities. You thought it was your business acumen. Good timing. Market forces working in your favor. David sank into a chair. No. Every major success Hamilton Industries has had in the past 7 years can be traced back to companies I own, partnerships I orchestrated, or information I provided through intermediaries. I've been your silent partner, your invisible investor, your anonymous benefactor. Why? Dad's voice was barely audible. Because you're my family. Because I love you. Because I wanted you to succeed. But we never knew. You never asked. You never wondered how a struggling family business managed to thrive in an increasingly competitive market. You never questioned why everything always seemed to work out exactly when you needed it to. You just assumed it was your own competence. The forensic accountant cleared his throat. If I may, there's another issue we need to discuss. The withdrawal of support structures has created some immediate challenges for Hamilton Industries. Without the silent partnerships and favorable contracts, the company is facing significant financial pressure. David looked up at me with something approaching desperation. Sarah, we need to fix this. Do you? What do you mean? I mean, you were so relieved at my graduation. So happy to finally be free of the burden of supporting me. Dad announced it to half the faculty. You all celebrated the fact that you wouldn't have to sacrifice for me anymore. We didn't know. You didn't want to know. For 7 years, you had every opportunity to ask questions, to take an interest in my work, to wonder how a medical student could afford to live comfortably without ever seeming stressed about money. Instead, you chose to believe that I was a drain on family resources. Mom was crying harder now. Sarah, please. We made a mistake. We didn't understand. You didn't try to understand. There's a difference. I stood up and gathered my things. But here's what I'm willing to offer. You wanted independence, and I think that's actually a healthy thing. Hamilton Industries can survive without my support. It'll be challenging, but it's possible. You'll need to make some changes. Downsize the executive salaries. Eliminate some of the luxury expenses. Focus on core competencies instead of expansion. Sarah, Dad said, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are. And I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the old dynamic. You wanted to be free of the burden of supporting me, and I'm honoring that wish. You're free. What about the family? Jennifer asked quietly. What about Sunday dinners and holidays and... Those were never dependent on money, Jennifer. If you want family relationships, we can have family relationships. But they'll be based on mutual respect and genuine affection, not on financial obligations or assumptions about who's supporting whom. I paused at the door. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what I've accomplished. And I'm proud that I was able to help you succeed, even if you never realized it was happening. But I'm done being invisible. I'm done being treated like a charity case by people I've been quietly supporting for years. Where does this leave us? David asked. It leaves you exactly where you said you wanted to be at my graduation. Independent. Free to succeed or fail based on your own efforts and abilities. Isn't that what you wanted? The drive back to the hospital was surreal. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely free of the complex web of financial support and emotional manipulation that had defined my relationship with my family. No more carefully orchestrated business interventions. No more invisible safety nets. No more pretending to be something I wasn't. Just me, my medical career, and a bank account that contained more money than most people see in several lifetimes. My phone rang as I was parking at the hospital. Sarah, it's Margaret. I wanted to let you know that the financial separation is complete. All Hamilton Industries support structures have been dissolved, and your personal assets are now completely independent of any family-related entities. Thank you. I should also mention that your patent portfolio has been performing exceptionally well. The latest licensing deal with Medicore Technologies came through this morning. Your net worth has increased by approximately $12 million since your graduation. I laughed, for the first time in weeks. Margaret, I think it's time to start being more visible with my philanthropic work. No more anonymous donations. I want my name on the hospital wing I'm funding. I want public recognition for the scholarship programs. I want the world to know exactly who Dr. Sarah Hamilton is and what she's accomplished. That sounds like an excellent plan. As I walked back into Chicago General Hospital to finish my shift, I realized that my father had been right about one thing at my graduation. It was time for someone else to support me. That someone just happened to be me. 3 months later, I was featured on the cover of Forbes' 30 Under 30 issue with the headline, "The Medical Student Who Revolutionized Emergency Medicine While Her Family Thought She Was Broke." The article detailed my 7 patents, my biotechnology innovations, and my anonymous philanthropy, including the revelation that I'd quietly supported my family's business for years while they believed they were supporting me. David framed the magazine cover and hung it in the Hamilton Industries lobby. It was, he told me later, the first time he'd ever felt genuinely proud to be my brother. Family dinners resumed a month after that, but now they're held at the restaurant I own, and the conversations focus on medical breakthroughs and biotechnology innovations instead of who's supporting whom. And when Dad introduces me to his business associates now, it says, "My daughter, Dr. Sarah Hamilton, the biotech entrepreneur." Never once as a burden. Independence, it turns out, was exactly what we all needed.